The last 3 decades have seen a seismic shift in the way consumers see car brands and cars and how they conflate them with their own perception of self. The decline in popularity of minivans and MPVs can be attributed to SUVs and crossovers being marketed as the cooler, more rugged alternative, with the minivan coming off as a last resort option, despite often being more practical and less expensive than their SUV counterparts. But while the rise of crossovers and trucks is discussed constantly, less attention has been given to the change in perception of car brands themselves, especially in the context of the European market, a rewiring of car brands in the public's perception. If you were an automaker with any amount of self-respect that didn't cater only to the higher-end market, you would have a full lineup of models stretching from the bottom end of the pricing ladder to the top. This can be helpfully visualized by looking at the culture of company cars, also known as take-home vehicles, that were often offered to employees thanks to certain tax benefits. A sales representative, he might have been given a compact Opel Astra 1.6, with a clock if he was lucky. If that rep worked long and hard enough, he would have hopefully been promoted to a sales manager, and his Astra would be replaced with a Vectra, with a sunroof. And the sales director? He was sat behind the wheel of a Senator, the 3-liter E model, you know. For the longest time, this is how everyday manufacturers structured the lineups, with a great luxurious flagship model at the top of the price ladder. Despite often seeing more success with cheaper compact cars, these executive cars weren't pegs in a hole, they were high profit margin vehicles. Even if the sales numbers of the more inexpensive models were higher, these ones still raked in higher profits, making them highly important for the manufacturers. But as we roll into the 90s, the idea of leasing your car became more prevalent, thanks to factors like historically low interest rates. And if you're going to lease a car, why go for an expensive Ford Scorpio when your neighbor across the fence has a base model Fiesta in their driveway? Sure, you've got equipment and power they could only dream about, but their badge says Ford on it, and your badge says Ford on it. Class-wise, you're on the same level as them. So what do? The idea of a luxury car became intertwined with the idea of a luxury car maker. BMW, Mercedes, Jaguar, Audi became the go-tos, killing off anything the so-called mainstream manufacturers were trying to market as competitors. But as I mentioned, these were high profit margin vehicles for the companies, so they weren't willing to exit the segment completely quite yet. As the old adage goes, if you can't beat them, make up new rules for yourself. What followed in the early 2000s were 6 bold, bizarre experiments aimed at capturing new types of market segments in the field of luxury automobiles. You could make a case for Volkswagen's Phaeton belonging here, but that's another story for another day. What we're left with are 6 experiments from 5 ordinary European manufacturers that can be grouped into 2 groups of 3: faux hatchbacks and the French. Here's the thing though, the French were really never that successful in the premium segment, as oftentimes these large French barges would sell decently well in France, but outside of their home market, they'd barely make a dent in the segment. Really, you could say the last successful French luxury car was the Citroen C6, introduced in 1974. You wanna argue against that? Okay, how certain are you that the Renault Saffron isn't something I just made up? Exactly. The CX's successor, the XM, despite high hopes, was a failure in the marketplace, ending its run in 2000, leaving the brand without a model in the premium market. Citroen were skeptical about putting a new luxury cruiser into production, and as such were slow to develop one. Nevertheless, Citroen tasked their design team, alongside DRA, Bertone, Houllier, Italdesign and Pininfarina, with imagining a new kind of big Citroen, focusing on space and comfort. Out of these proposals, and despite the outside help brought in, Citroen's in-house team won out with a design that was quickly adapted and revealed as the C6 Lineage concept in 1999. An immensely positive reaction to the concept car helped move things along, but money was tight. Not to mention, you couldn't compete with the likes of BMW and Mercedes in Europe without offering a diesel V6, and the Lion V6 engine wouldn't be ready for another couple of years. This is what the gods gifted us in 2005, a whole 6 years after that initial concept was revealed, the production Citroen C6. Love it or hate it, it's gonna stir your emotions with some great detailing and extremely French proportions, with that long front end and short tail. Indeed, the C6 is rather massive, being nearly 5 meters in length, because this large body shell opened up much room inside, which was essential in achieving the design goal of a large, soft, lofty cruiser that would float along comfortably at 100 kilometers per hour. It also has a concave rear window inspired by the old CX. Good, very good. But you can't just bet on looks and comfort, no. In this new age of luxury saloons, you need a party piece or two. And this is a big Citroen after all. Of course it's filled with great touches, like an automatically deploying rear spoiler, or these half-moon-shaped door pockets that slide down smoothly and are lined in fabric inside. This is good. This is what I'm talking about, alright? We have the technology to make Citroen C6s, and yet we choose not to. Well, in fairness, there might be a good reason behind that. In the UK, one of its main target markets, 2007 was its best year of sales, with 350 cars being sold. Fewer than 1,000 cars made it to the UK, all things considered, leading to a Citroen executive later admitting that they simply shouldn't have bothered with right-hand drive markets. All in all, a little over 23,000 C6s were produced until the car saw its demise in 2012. Well, maybe the C6 had simply been too wild, too out there, scaring off ordinary conservative buyers and coming in 5 years after the XM had been discontinued, giving Citroen buyers time to move on to other offerings from competitors. The answer to those complaints then must be the Peugeot 607. Unlike the C6, it was rather ordinary, with inoffensive styling, and arrived just in time to replace the aging 605 in 1999. Like the Citroen, sportiness was of no concern for Peugeot. This luxury boat was to be soft and comfy and dangerous at high speeds. As it turned out, at higher speeds, the car would initially seem slow to react to steering inputs, causing the driver to apply more lock, at which point the car would react sharply and bolt in the given direction. In order to address this, changes were made to the anti-roll bars and damper rates to react more quickly, also fitting wider 225 tires to all models. However, these changes delayed the launch of right-hand drive cars until January of 2001, 6 months behind schedule. But eventually, this is what everyone got, and black bumpers, really? Come on, Peugeot, what are we doing here? At least the shape is rather good, isn't it? I don't like that interior though. I don't like the shape of that pod. It looks scary. But hey, you know, you got plenty of kit for your money at least. Aircon, electric windows, 8 airbags, a CD player, a tire pressure monitor, parking sensors, a phone. All came as standard. If you want to entice people, I guess that's a good way of going about things. But did they entice people though? At its damn launch event, even Peugeot's higher-ups were honest about the 607's aspirations, as one higher-up was quoted as saying, "If the car can at least wipe its own nose, we'll be happy." Well, could it? I mean, that's better than nothing. Could you say that about the 607 itself, though? I'm not sure. The plug was eventually pulled in 2010, with fun stuff like a coupe version never being realized. An outrageous sedan couldn't make it, and a sensible sedan couldn't make it. What we're left with is... God. Once upon a time, a company by the name of Matra engineered and built the Espace for Renault in Matra's own factory. This, let's say, unnerved Renault, as the Espace was so popular that Matra could barely keep up with the demand. Not to mention the good sum of money that went in Matra's pockets for each and every Espace they built. Renault wanted that money for themselves, so in the late 90s, they kindly asked Matra if they could take over production of the Espace themselves, and in exchange, Matra could engineer a new MPV that they could then produce in place of the Espace. Renault had seen great success with its MPVs, arguably creating the segment with the original Espace, then popularizing the compact MPV market with the Scenic, and applying the one-box design to a successful city car with the 1993 Twingo. The company was 3 out of 3 so far, so why not make another one? The target audience would be former Espace owners whose kids had grown up and left home, but who had gotten used to the comfort and practicality of the big MPV, and as such would like a minivan that was more luxurious with better performance, making more of a statement. It's here where the bravest, most intrepid decision in automotive history was made. Despite prototyping a 4-door body style, Matra and Renault made the decision to make their new coupe Espace a 2-door vehicle, combining all of the style and pizzazz of a coupe with the style and pizzazz of a minivan. Something that would constantly astonish anyone taking a walk around the car. The Avantime, Renault's new luxurious 4-seater coupe. The centerpiece here, literally, are the doors, weighing more than 50 kilograms each, and with a length of 1.5 meters, they were designed to optimally facilitate entering and exiting the rear seats, which was achieved with an innovative design featuring double hinges that allowed the doors to move not only out, but also forward. So these massive doors didn't actually open up that far, and made sure getting in the back was genuinely easy. The system was basically magic, which is why developing the doors and getting them to work right took such a long time that the launch of the car was delayed multiple times because of them. But when it finally was launched, it could be had with a good choice of gas engines, and oh, who cares about the powertrain. It's a car that looks like this. So let's admire it for a moment. Is it possible for any alternate universe to exist where the Avantime is a success story? I ask because the Avantime was sold alongside Renault's other premium segment representative, the Vel Satis, even being priced above it. Renault was essentially competing with themselves, and it was hardly a secret that Renault themselves urged their salespeople to push the safer Vel Satis to customers, ahead of this Grand Tourer minivan. Is it any surprise that this vehicle saw cumulative sales of just 8,577 units? Oh my god, that's unprecedented, even for this video. We can't be mad at anyone for it being a complete failure though, in terms of production numbers. None of you would buy one if you had to pay original MSRP for it, but I think all of us can be truly thankful that it does exist. Thankful that a system of levels and checks and overseeing managers and bosses failed to stop a disaster from happening. Thanks to that, we're blessed to have a truly once-in-a-lifetime automobile to admire. I'm stating it here that the Avantime is more admirable than most supercars or high-end luxury cars or 90s economy cars, because it tried something new. And in the process, it did create something new, an entire segment. A segment that's called the Renault Avantime. Now that was one side of this collection of oddities, experiments in style and, well, Frenchness. The other side is a group of 3 individual cars from 3 individual manufacturers, all of whom managed to place their bets on the same idea on how to reinvent the ordinary luxury car. It's an idea perhaps inspired by the compact MPV craze, kickstarted by the Renault Scenic that I mentioned earlier, as we witnessed ordinary family cars become taller to maximize interior volume without necessarily increasing the car's footprint. The Peugeot 307 was 13 centimeters taller than its predecessor and adopted more of a one-box design. The 5-door Fiat Stilo looked like an MPV, had sliding split rear seats, and drop-down tables in the front seatbacks. The Seat Toledo, I think, speaks for itself. So, Renault, Opel, and Fiat took it upon themselves, independently of each other, to Austin maxify their premium offerings, each developing a hatchback model to go against the BMWs and Audis of the world and redefine the luxury market. Opel did so by trying to save as much money as possible. By 2003, the Omega's time was up, without Opel or Vauxhall necessarily wanting to leave the segment altogether. Their solution at the turn of the century was to look down a segment at the upcoming Mark III Vectra and come up with a high-end version of that. Where the luxury would stick out would not be at the front, but in the back, as this new kind of car would focus on the comfort of the people sitting in the rear seats. They'd slide back and forth and recline. Most models came with 2, not 3 seatbelts at the back. You could option it with a DVD player, tray tables, a waste bin, even a mini fridge that sat between the seats. To help make the rear rather vast and offer loads of legroom, the new car was designed on the platform of the Vectra Estate, which had a longer wheelbase than the Vectra sedan, at more than 2.8 meters. All of this packaged inside of a hatchback design, meaning that despite the longer wheelbase, it was still shorter than the sedan-bodied Vectra. This was the new Opel and Vauxhall Signum. The definitive car for people who want tons of space in the back and desperately crave less boot space. You see the problem here, right? You were paying more for a smaller car, where all of the fun stuff was at the back. Well, you're the driver, you're at the front. Who cares about some tray tables when you can't use them? Because you're sitting at the front. Well, what about a chauffeur? That's a stupid question. If you can afford a chauffeur, you're gonna be disgusted if you have to be even 100 meters within the vicinity of an Opel badge, let alone a tarted up Vectra. Opel was banking on so-called unconventional models, like the Signum or Meriva, to account for 40% of the company's sales. Another 40% for conventional cars, your Astras and Corsas and Vectras, and the remaining 20% would be sales of niche coupes and roadsters. It was a brave strategy, but Opel and Vauxhall have to have some of the most conservative customers around. I'd bet they were immediately spooked off by the Signum when they saw that its name didn't end with the letter A. Oh, the heresy! Wow, that's what my scale says every morning. Hey, here's the thing, despite these rather pitiful numbers, you don't have to feel bad for the megacorporation, because I can't imagine they lost a whole lot of money on the Signum, as it was still very much based on GM's Epsilon architecture, shared between many cars, including the Chevy Malibu Maxx, one of those cars that looks like it's made purely from plastic. And perhaps most interestingly of all, the second generation Fiat Croma. The Croma differs from everything else we've talked about, as it wasn't a case of a manufacturer attempting to stay relevant in the large car segment, and was instead Fiat's attempt at re-entering the market after a decade-long absence. After the discontinuance of the original Croma in 1996, Fiat lacked the funds necessary to develop a successor on their own, and as such, the company was ultimately left out of the large car segment. In the early 2000s, they would strike a partnership with General Motors, as the Americans agreed to acquire a 20% share in Fiat, which provided the Italians with a basis on which to design and build a new midsize, the aforementioned Epsilon platform. Fiat's new large car would be codenamed New Large, with both a sedan and a wagon being developed. Their design overseen by the masters over at Pininfarina, and both slated for a late 2003 release date. Until then, the project was coming along nicely, with plenty of prototypes spotted testing across Europe. That was, at least, until a man by the name of Johnny Coda was appointed as the new president of Fiat's business side of things. Having taken a look at the new large project, he declared the car as being so horrendously ugly, he immediately ordered for the design to be completely redone, with the interior also getting flack for falling woefully short of what is expected from a car like this. Pininfarina were fired, and as a Hail Mary, Giorgetto Ciucciario himself was brought in to give it another try. It's in this stage of development where Ciucciario became keen on incorporating MPV elements into an ordinary large family car, keeping his philosophy of maximizing passenger space without expanding the car's footprint. A crossover between an estate car and an MPV would result in rather distinctive proportions, perhaps akin to those of a hatchback, but described by Fiat as a comfort wagon. And after all that, after millions spent developing, then millions spent redeveloping this beast, multiple delays, the end result... Lord have mercy, what am I looking at here? As in genuinely, what am I looking at? It's nothing. I mean, to be fair, this was during that period when Ciucciario went blind from mercury poisoning. I presume. I'd say one of these original design studies looks much better than the production version, but I'm not the head of a massive car company, so what do I know? But the question is it a luxury car? Well, not as such as all the other cars on here are, but it does have a thermal glove compartment that you could control the temperature of. Still, it's clear that's not where their ambitions ended, with them celebrating the car's launch by unveiling the Croma 8V. believe it or not, it didn't stand for 8 valves, it stood for 8V. Under the hood sat a 4.2-liter Maserati V8, delivering 400 horsepower to those massive chromed wheels. Inside, you'd find DVD players, champagne glass holders, 2 seats instead of 3 at the back, sound familiar? And even a glass partition between those seats and the rear of the car. It was a concept car, but it clearly showed Fiat's ambitions of competing not only in the midsize segment, but also in the premium market too. Well, it might have worked out if the initial road reviews were anything to gloat about, but they really weren't. It was a highly unemotional, generic, not excelling at anything particular kind of car, and despite a actually pretty good facelift in 2007, sales faltered with its peak year reaching just under 37,000 unit sales. A Lancia variant with the name Medea never made it beyond the development phase. I think it's safe to say the second generation Fiat Croma didn't really inspire anyone. The Renault Vel Satis inspired Seat designers with the 2004 Toledo, so it already has the upper hand here. The Avantime was, in a sense, forced onto Renault as I discussed earlier, and therefore ended up competing directly with Renault's homegrown luxury effort and successor to the Safran. Development of the Vel Satis originated in the mid-90s, just as the company was ready to reveal the incredibly luxurious Initiale concept. Renault's head of design, Patrick Lequemont, wants the upcoming production car to be as close to the Initiale concept as possible. But the head of product wishes for it to be a cross between a traditional saloon car and an Espace. With the two clashing and Renault CEO Louis Schweitzer struggling to pick a side, no one really wins out. And in the end, the Vel Satis comes out looking like... Having spent a total of 550 million euros on developing the new car, they did get to show off a rather good interior and many innovative tech and safety features for that money. It was around this time, after all, that Renault took a vested interest in safety, with the Mark II Laguna having become the very first car to obtain a 5-star rating in Euro NCAP crash testing. The Vel Satis became the second ever car to receive a 5-star Euro NCAP safety rating. Renault predicted to sell 50,000 Vel Satises within the first year. That never happened. In fact, sales were so poor the company ended up losing more than 18,000 euros on each car they sold. You could blame the audacious styling, but further damage was done in the public's eyes by the electrical faults, which heavily plagued the cars and made them highly unreliable. 58,629 cars would be sold in total. The sales numbers alone would suggest that the 607 and Fiat Croma, so to say, won this competition. But these days, they're clearly the most forgotten ones. But what they all achieved was failing to bring buyers back to their brands in lieu of going to the BMW dealer across the street. Fiat's large car story ended in 2010. Peugeot 607 never got a successor, while Citroen did make another C6. For China, so it doesn't count. The Signum died in 2008 without a direct replacement. Renault did introduce the Latitude premium sedan in 2010, but that thing was designed for Korea and European sales were basically an afterthought. So really, all of them are truly the last of their kind. The Croma still has to go in timeout though, my god is it dull. I'm devastated that Finland didn't win, but you know, Bangaranga is a fine song. Regardless, a big warm welcome to our brand new 2027 Corsi members. Teddy R1087, Jimbo McDonald, Poobcock, Baked Beans Garage, hello. A4 Deluxex, Adore HD, Tata Melamamu, Rage Cannon 5311, Nikos Lichias, Hui, Matt, Gothzilla, Like Candy, Sid, I Own Swag 2008, Filthy, Lemonakis, Goose, Arrow, Tom Myers a comedian, 999, Hot First Cousin, Devon M, Magia, The Yowish, Justin Longprey, Showchef, Christian Andani, Trisho, Sir Ryan, Ivan Setiawan, Daniel Tanev, Vladislav Dektyaryanko, Tosiek Cheshore, Bartosz Młynarski. I love Poland. Why are there so many Polish people here? Are you from Poland, Dick Burns Valley? Sounds like it hurts.